Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of our financial breakthrough series. Hopefully, you've watched part one, otherwise, you're going to be a little bit lost on part two. Today, I'm Gary, and you are
I'm going to be Meten for today.
superb. I'm very pleased to meet you.
Me too.
Um, in part one, we went through a chart, you know, and this was the 21st of October chart that Meten pulled up, and it was pretty profound, I have to say, and very, very clear. And it kind of aligns to some of the stuff that we're definitely going to be talking about in part two. But Meten has a chart on the 31st of October, 30th, sorry, 31st, which is, I think, going to be important for a few reasons. And then obviously we're going to have a quick, brief look at December, because as Meten said in part one, that's when we're going to get the clarity, or we might be able to start to see through the fog of deception.
Should we start with that, or do you want to go over? You were going to go over some of the bank collapses. What should we do
Well,
first?
I think we need to continue from the 21st. Um, I wonder if you just bring up the chart really, really quickly, just so that we can remind um, everybody of what the 21st chart looked like. Um,
Yeah. Yes.
you know, they can screenshot it if they want and do whatever they want. But it's a very, very important chart.
Talking about the new moon chart we just did on the last
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah, from the 21st. Yeah, perfect. 5th of September, is that the one? Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so what Gary's talking about is the grand water trine: Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and the Aries vortex, and then the Aries. No, sorry, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, and the Aries vortex. Yes, and then the new moon is in late Libra, squaring late Jupiter, and that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah,
No, and squaring, sorry, and squaring the Aries vortex, late. No, no, I'm fucking up. No, no, squaring a Chiron in Aries. So it's two layerings, two levels.
now something you said on this chart, which is quite interesting, that I think really bears this date. It's going to be an important date. Really is going to be an important period. And though we say date, we can be days before and days after, and sometimes you won't know what's gone on until afterwards, which is what we discussed on the first show with the 23rd, but of September. But you said three very important things to me, which we can then bring on to what's happening at the moment or has just happened this weekend. Now, you said one of them is holding on to lots of stuff. One of them is, so the way you described it was really, really interesting. Like the the trine was three different aspects of, some people have nothing, some are holding on to something. And so how did you describe that again? I can't quite remember.
Okay, so what I described was we have a new moon, so it's another step of the grand vision of a new economic system, one that hopefully works, or or different variations of that vision. That vision is owned by the Aries vortex because that's the beginning of that vision coming into fruition, which won't happen till spring of next year. It won't be solidified till around then. And you can see that's kind of close to the north where the north node's been, but now it's moving away towards Aquarius. The other is Jupiter is in square to the new moon, so there's a tension between the new vision and the people, or the nurturers, or the public, or other different political and religious leaders. And so with money, Gary, you brought up something really interesting when we were talking about the water trine. You were talking about the currencies and the metaphors.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, it's a water trine. So Mars and Mercury are holding on to the money, cutting with the sword, cutting boundaries. Like, fuck you, we're keeping our money. We're keeping our money in gold and silver, or we're keeping our gold and silver. And then Jupiter's over here in Cancer hoarding money as well. Like, no, we're taking all the money. We're talking all that's ours and more. And then we have the Aries Vortex here, where people are hiding the money, buying Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin, funneling it through this bank and insolving this bank and a bank run on this bank, and the money's disappearing into a hole.
Yeah.
And that's that area, that's that void of the Aries Vortex. And so the money's moving. It's moving in this grand trine. And Venus, the ruler of finance, is the ruler of this new moon chart because Sun and Moon are in Libra, and Venus is also in Libra, and Venus is right there in trine with Uranus and in trine. Whoa, hold on. This is a grand water trine as well because we have Venus in Libra and Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So this is a grand air trine as well. I didn't see this. So Venus is working with Uranus, sudden shift and a new vision, a new destruction of something that's not working with Pluto there. And the magic triangle is still in action because the center is there is vortex, and then you got Uranus and Pluto on each side. So there is geometries layered upon geometries in this new moon chart. I mean, this looks like revolution. This is just like fucking revolution,
Yeah. Yeah.
all levels.
And this is part of the reason why I want to go back to this chart because uh, out of all the charts that Meten's shown me so far since I've known him, and we've done a few series of these things, this chart for me really hits the nail on the head with some information that I've now, which I've got from this weekend, and it kind of shows the fluidity of what's going on and the suddenness of what we could see because what we're now what's come from the 23rd of September in Argentina going, we've also had this weekend two major companies in collapse. And we're talking multi billions of dollars here. So, with this chart in mind, I think what Maten's just explained, we will see playing out from these two companies and another company, a bank I'm going to talk about, and how it's going to be that the people are going to be fighting over the assets as they dwindle into collapse of the system of the dominoes that fall from this particular issue that we've now got. Okay. So, what we've had this weekend, so it's the 29th, so 27th, 28th, whenever it was, when I first saw this, it was Sunday, I think, when it first happened, is we've got a company called First Brands USA has collapsed. And they are an auto parts and private debt company. We've also had another company called Tricolor Holdings collapse, a secondary auto lending and debt stroke loans company. Now, to have two major companies in the same market collapse at the same time is very unusual. And the fact that both of these were triple A plus rated, as in the best financial health into their system that you can get, and they still collapsed overnight, literally, is really concerning. Now, First Brands USA could potentially have between 10 and 50 billion in debt. 10 to 50 billion. And it appears that they have been using the subprime system of hiding debt off their books and reloaning it out, um, as has been seen previously with other crashes. So we have accountancy, skullduggery, and shenanigans going on. But in the middle of this first bonds USA collapse, and bearing in mind that they've probably only got 1 to 10 billion in assets and probably 10 to 50 billion in debt, is one of the major banks, or the major bank that has been bankrolling and is fully in bed with First Brands USA, is a US bank called Jefferies. They're a big creditor. Now, the exposure that Jefferies has to this company is uncertain, but it could be between 10, it could be, sorry, between 1 and 10 or 20 billion. And Jefferies Bank itself, I think, is something like 87 or 67 billion company. So it's a big bank, but not big enough. And it's likely that Jefferies Bank in the US will not survive the contagion from the First Brands collapse. And there's contagion because of the hidden amounts of money around. Now, that's bad enough in itself, but I then mentioned Tricolor Holdings, and they've got 1 billion plus in liabilities, but 1 to 10 billion in debts. And so, a very similar situation, it could be even worse. And there will be banks and financial institutions that have been backing them. I don't know what banks. I tried to do some research and I couldn't find out. But fundamentally, we're talking about um, lots of issues and a lot of money. So between the two of them, worst case scenario, we could be talking about 70 billion, and best case scenario, 20 billion. But in a market currently that's got so little margin for error, are we really looking at a situation where the banking sector in the US can contain the possible contagion? Because the subprime from the Lehman Brothers that caused the first crash, this is exactly what we're looking at in a different format. And does it mean that we're going to go on until the point in which it all starts to come out, it starts to unravel, and that 21st of October chart with the Grand Trine and everything else going on is all these different banks and systems and situations in the US fighting for their little bit, their pot of money to try and stay afloat, while the gold and the silver sitting on the outside of that water trine shoots up.
And what are they going to do about that? Where's the money really going in those crashes?
It'll go to the main creditors, but it's the defaults of the loans, isn't it, and everything else, and the derivatives of that are hidden off the books, but they're not hidden as such. They're allowed to, as financial institution, offset debts with other things because because we know that the banks are opaque, and we know the monetary system is opaque, and we know that they make the rules up as they go along. But when they get caught out, it goes spectacularly wrong. So we could have potential contagion from Argentina and the IMF, which will affect countries. And we're now beginning to see the collapses of two big financial institutions, loans and debts that are connected to banks. One bank particularly, the Jefferies Bank. And for me, that is exactly what we were talking about previously again with this September period, because although the 23rd would have been the peak, the energy would have been slowly dissipating over that period, And as you've said to me before, that energy can last sometimes for 3 months, can't it?
3 months to 6 months to a year. And it's a little different for a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, but we have them in pairs. So the September 7th eclipse was also a part of what's going on, but it's more connected to the karma because of the south node and the north node were really close to the first eclipse on September 7th. Whereas the September 21st eclipse is in opposition to the Aries vortex, so it directly affects the vision of this new economic financial system for next year. And so there's like a hidden zone there of people working behind the scenes and things happening that we can't see. And so it's like there's this system trying to be created without our input. And it's up to us whether we want to say, what our personal authority is in response to that
Yeah.
and saying yes or no to it.
But it's very interesting that when we start to look at charts in the future, and we're recording this on the 29th, and I'm not sure when I'll be posting it or Meten will, because it's part two. But you know, these are ongoing stories. But bear in mind, we're recording this just a couple of days after I first came across this information. I didn't do a show myself because I knew I was doing a show with Meten, so I've held this information back. But it also fits in with the chart and what Meten's been talking about, particularly in part one. So the end part of part one, it might be worth you watching that again and then coming back onto this again so that you can kind of understand the real implications of this are so, so serious. You know, we're only looking at a snowflake or a straw to break, a snowflake to create the avalanche. That's all we're waiting for. Or we're waiting for one more straw to go into that camel's back to break it. And here we have a hay bale being dropped on the back of the camel. And here we have a blizzard on top of the mountain because we're
Yeah,
talking large numbers.
and that's significant because it's every 2 weeks this repetitive moon cycle. It's very predictable. Every 2 weeks we have this energy that's pulled from the earth for us to release, or to give way, or to like hold on to our energy. And it's the full moons and the new moons. The moon's frequency is trying to pull energy out of us. And so it's a measure of our balance if we can hold our energy. And most humans can't. So there's always explosions and implosions every time there's a full moon or new moon. And an eclipse is like, unmeasurable, like extreme of that, like I'm sure all of you have your eclipse stories from this past September 7th and 21st. I know I've had plenty of clients who were like, what the, who definitely went through something. So we see this on all levels. And, the major thing with Aries Vortex, it's trying to create a new system in the world. And we're seeing, the high and the low waves, every time a moon comes on. And so those who are not balanced, they're just going to tip over, and drown in the water, And so we're just trying to all keep our balance, all these businesses, all these systems, all these people, us, and then the deletes, and whoever like behind the scenes, So it's just a continual like process of balance with a capital B as best we can.
Yeah, yeah. Because I do think the deletes know stuff's wrong and they know they're coming to the end. Because we see signs of this as well. Certainly in the UK, um, HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, has just for the month of September brought this in. And it was reported mid-September, or I certainly picked up with it mid to the end of September. And what the news from HMRC was fundamentally in the United Kingdom is that the government has authorized HMRC to be able to go into people's bank accounts who they believe owe them money for tax and remove it without permission. Now, That smells to me of desperation. That smells to me of a system that's collapsing and every penny counts. And so to make sure that they get the money on time, or you've got a little window where you've got to pay them. And as soon as that deadline happens, fundamentally the HMRC will go into your bank account, see how much money you've got, and if it covers their debt, regardless of what other things you've got to pay out, wages if you're a company, mortgages, rent, whatever else, business rates, they'll go in and they'll take that money. And they will shut businesses down there by doing so. Before you get a fine of 100 quid a week or whatever it was, now they're going into the bank accounts and taking your money. And this is all linking up to the digital system where they want business owners to be linked into the digital system. So owning your own business, in fact, is now going to become virtually impossible in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
I mean, how unfriendly can you get towards entrepreneurism? That's a big word, wasn't it? In the UK, I mean, what is the point of you trying to employ people? The cost of employing people has just gone up drastically. The government has made it more expensive to employ people.
When does the HMRC, when is their deadlines? Does it change? Is it a certain time every year, or what's the
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
that?
Well, fundamentally, um, I think end of January is when you've got to put your books in, and that's the last opportunity. Um, and then you've got to pay up fairly quickly. But I think bigger businesses have to pay up half yearly. And I know of people who started up businesses like on Etsy, and because they registered with HMRC were literally looking at their books weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, ensuring that they were getting their wedge straight away and were overseeing the business. And I know people that actually stopped what their business is because of HMRC's overstepping of the control of how they ran their business. And that was a year or so ago, a couple of years ago now.
That's happening on the crypto exchanges too. Constant reminders to like either enter your taxes or make sure they're done or something like that. I don't even know what they're asking for.
Yeah, I think you've got to declare your gains of crypto, and even though you've not pulled the money out of the crypto, so they're unrealized gains, I think is the key words to this. They're unrealized gains, then HMRC, who, and I think probably around the world this could now be the case, that the tax authority wants you to register, declare your crypto, and when it goes up a certain amount, they will then demand the tax payment of what you've made on that via capital gains. So I think you're allowed in the UK the first £3,000, and over £3,000, you then have to pay 40% on top of everything over £3,000. Because I think they just recently lowered the level.
Got it. Yeah,
They
because I
really
don't.
are screwing everybody to the ground, aren't they, over all this stuff?
Right, right.
You will own nothing and be happy. And you're kind of seeing it in the financial markets and the way the governments certainly UK government is doing what they're doing. And again, let's do a disclaimer before we get too far. None of what we're talking about is financial advice. We're not
No,
financial advisors. This is just
no.
a show, an entertainment show. And
Fun.
please see the disclaimer in my channel for for such things that we're not advice or anything else like that. It's just purely entertainment. We have to say that every time, and I nearly forgot. So,
Yeah, good. I wouldn't have remembered.
so yeah, really interesting times at the moment. So, do you want to talk about crypto now, or would you like to look at the 31st chart and then look at crypto, Meten? I mean, because I know you've got some crypto stuff to talk about, which is fascinating.
I'll just talk a little about it and then we can go into the October 30th chart. We'll build into that because that's the next chart we were going to do.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah,
So Gary and I went over a little in the last video how October, the month of October, is just looking so revolutionary, just so intense. Usually September is sideways with the markets, both crypto, the markets, all the markets, etc. And it looks no different this year. It looks like there should be a shift upwards as we progress through October up until the new moon. Likely a crash, correction, not necessarily a crash, but a correction after the new moon or right before it. And what's interesting is it's been in the news recently that there's going to be a maximum solar, what is it called? A solar maximum?
yeah. Solar maximum from the sun. Yeah, like a it spouts some energy out, doesn't it? And I think that's meant to hit us around the 30th mark.
And so I was mentioning to Gary that it's really interesting around that time because that's around Halloween. And Halloween is an ancient pagan holiday that's in polarity opposition to April 29th Beltane around that time. And so it's really interesting because those are like portals, like a funnel with two different ends, right, to the portal.
Yeah.
And so what it is that, a lot of planets are in Scorpio during that time. So, as the cliche is, over repeated, the veils are thin, meaning, there's not as much sunlight as we move towards December. So it's more like a dark side, a dark kind of time. And so the powers of the underworld are stronger during this period. And so it's very interesting that we're getting a solar minimum, almost like a black sun in emphasis. The sun is like creating all this energy, but it's happening in a dark time. So I'm calling it the black, like a black sun, because also it's happening around its period of the end of the month, right when we're going to move into November. And in November, we're going to have a bunch of retrograde. There's already Saturn and Neptune in retrograde presently, and some other planets will move in and continue to move. And Mercury's going to go retrograde for most of November, the second week of November. And so that means extreme shifts for everybody, pivots for everyone. Oh, we're going in this way now, we're going in this direction. Now let's reflect on where we've gone so far. Let's stop a moment, reflect, and see which direction we want to go now, or should we continue in the same direction? So that's what retrogrades are. It's just a pause. It's just a reflection, a reset on what we want to do here, a review. And so it seems that there's going to be another build in November. Markets probably will go sideways and then another correction and then a build to December to the 7th and 21st, the echoes of the September eclipses. But let's go ahead and look at the chart for October 30th and let me see if there's any more clues because I haven't really looked at it. I'm just going by memory of what usually occurs around this time. So let me pull this up. This is a chart I did for October 31st. Let me go ahead and share that. And so as you guys can see here, let me just widen it. Okay, here we go. And enlarge it a bit. So as you can see, as I was saying, the sun's going to be in Scorpio. So the sun is taking its visit to the underworlds. And Venus is still in Libra, but moving ever closer towards Scorpio. Mars is still in Scorpio, and it's in a direct opposition to Uranus. So this is sudden flares of temper, sudden flares of violence, sudden flares of this is mine, stay away from me, protection of the self, like the sword coming out and defining boundaries of the self. And you see Mars is still there close to Mercury, so very much worrying about what's mine and what's yours, and you know what I mean, holding on to what's mine and making sure it's protected. So a lot of violence, a lot of sudden violent temperament around ownership of ideas and resources, ideas with Uranus and Gemini, you know, resources with Mars and Venus and Scorpio and moving into Sagittarius. And then I just did it for this particular, not any particular time. This is just 1:45 Washington, D.C. on October 31st. So this is in movement towards, nighttime, right? This is still in the afternoon. This is what's building up. Usually things happen before. So you could see here Jupiter is almost in Leo and Pluto is still there in early Pluto. So what do we got? We got a opposition between Jupiter and Pluto. So we have violence on a large scale or some kind of homecoming destruction to whatever is not working right now. Whatever is not authentic will be destroyed. Jupiter expanding the fire of Pluto and Aquarius and causing tension and conflict and more evidence for the revolutionary movements of this month, it seems. And then there's the Aries Vortex still in now fully in Pisces, with Neptune having moved also into Pisces at this time. This is a lot of karmic past coming back up. As you see, it's close there to the North Node, reaffirming the veil, reaffirming that we cannot think our way out of these problems. We need to go with what feels correct. We can't just rationalize this or rationalize that. That's not going to work this time. And I didn't mention last time this was kind of, well, because Venus wasn't there yet. Also to note, Venus is in 22 degrees Libra, and that's in 2-degree opposition. It's moving up. It's moving towards an opposition with Chiron. So that's a lot of pain in finances and what we're doing, where our money is, and what's going on with our money. So it looks like a huge um, trigger for our mental wounds, with Chiron and Aries. That's a wound in the head, that's the mind worrying or not being able to stop thinking or worrying or being anxious, and Venus opposing that means the money is on our mind, we're thinking about our money. Is it protected? Where's our money? Is this our money? Is that our money? I mean, not even knowing what's our money, what's of real value. It's still all up in the air with the Aries vortex. It's hidden. We don't know where the true value is. We're all trying to find the true value that we trade with each other with, that we can share each other's talents. Because that's what money is. It's just a means of sharing our talents with each other, sharing what we can do for each other. And here it's lost. The Aries vortex is still a void. It's still a void. It's still hidden. It's still a well where we can't see clearly. And so it looks like with this chart, we're also moving towards or we just moved through, let's see, the sun just got into Aquarius. No, it just got into Scorpio. So it looks like the full moon, that'll just have been a new moon. So hold on, give me a second here. We just had the new moon. So the moon was in Scorpio. No, I'm all confused with that. I think we're moving towards a full moon in November, at the beginning part of November. So that'll be for a couple of weeks. But right now it looks like there was just, so confused, it looks like there was just a full moon. But anyway, so we're moving towards, as I was saying, that after this revolutionary month of October, we're moving into this retrograde month of November, where we kind of have a chance to stop and breathe and see, what have we been doing? What's clear? What's authentic? And we'll see what we lost, because it looks like there's, as with all revolutions, there's a lot of blood in the streets. And who's usually left bleeding? Is it the elites or is it the public? You know what I mean? Hopefully, if we can see through the illusions, it's not us, you know? And one thing Gary brought up, we were talking about, is that there's something about this solar maximum that could affect the grid, the electricity grid, you know? And where's our money? Where's our value? Is it in crypto? If it is, that's electric. That's the electrical grid. That's the smokeless fire, you know? That's something that's online unless you have cold wallets. And then what if you're wanting to sell, you know, what it is. So it looks, yeah, it looks kind of scary, you know, it looks kind of scary. There could be some, you know, I think they said in some places 24 hours at least of like loss of electricity. And what does that mean? That means could be 6 hours, it could be 3 days, 6 days, you know, who knows? That's just the estimate they're giving. Gary, you want to add in some input here?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, it might not happen in that way, but if it does, that would explain. I'm sure you said, was it 22 degrees at the top? And that's people
Yeah, for Venus
worrying.
and Libra. Yeah,
Yeah,
still in the finances.
and it's people worrying about their finances. Yeah.
Yeah, with that opposition to Chiron. Yeah, it's the mind worrying about.
So if they had no electricity and they know that we're in the middle of a real rocky part of the financial system from what's happened from the 21st and what continues to happen from what we've seen from First Brands and Tricolor, losing that power could really cause some mental anguish over the fact that people can't get their money and people don't have any money and have no access to the money that they need to survive. Is my mortgage going to be paid? You know, because this is the end of the month. This is when we would be paying in the UK certainly. This is when our direct debits would be coming out to pay our mortgage, our rent, our bills. A lot of the bills go out on the first, and to have at this key date some kind of electrical grid issue would cause huge amounts of stress and strain on an already strained system.
Yeah, this month, as Gary is suggesting, he's not being extreme at all because October usually is a month of extremes. And so if we see it, if crypto builds and the markets build, doesn't mean there's not going to be a correction on the other side of it. There always is. It'll keep going and up. It could keep going up and up and up, but that movement up is always followed by a correction. You know, it has to step down and then maybe up again, another step down, then up again. It's never just a straight line, you know, unless it's XRP. Then it's a straight line, at least from the past, you know. But I'm looking now at the new moon cycles because I was fucking up earlier on. So it looks like, yeah, October 21st, we had the new moon. So there's a full moon building at the end of this month towards November 5th. And check this out, Gary. It's going to be in Taurus, opposite the Scorpio sun. And guess what planet rules Taurus?
What?
Venus.
No
I know.
way.
Yep. So again, we're still processing what's happening with our money, with our resources. Taurus is our resources, our money, our materialism. You know, where is it? What's going on with it? And that's like a blowout. That's the full moon. That's a power outage of sorts. And that's 13 degrees, Taurus full moon. And and that'll build towards a new moon on November 20th in Scorpio. So by that time we'll be in the underworld. So the who knows where the money is, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe it's hiding in our secret wallets. Maybe it's gone in someone else's wallet, you know? We don't know. And that'll lead into a full moon in Gemini on December 4th. And that's right around that eclipse marker, you know, from the September 7th eclipse. And that's going to roll Mercury. So that's the emissary of the sun, you know, that's a mental kind of full moon there, kind of an exhaustion of the mind. And then right the day before December 21st, there's a new moon in Sagittarius. So both the moon and the sun will be an exact square to the September 21st eclipse.
That's interesting, isn't it?
So that new moon will be very interesting because that's also that's 28 degrees. Both the Scorpio and the Sag new moon of November 20th and December 20th are 28 degrees, and so is the new moon of October 21st is 28 degrees. All these 28-degree markers, that's what the eclipse was on Sunday, September 21st. So
And
all these like points hit over and over again.
and
Go
when we
ahead.
go to 10, the number 10 in tarot, that's endings. 10 is endings in tarot, always.
Yeah. Yeah, and this in 29, at 28, 29 is the anaretic degree. So it's, it's the final degree of a sign. It's the end. And so it's holding on desperately. But all these full moons, a lot of these full moons and new moons up until the end of the year are in 28, 29 degrees. So they're endings.
Yeah,
Crazy. Yeah, some feel like, what's been going on in the crypto world is like there's been a lot of predictions. Oh yeah, crypto is gonna, the bull run is gonna expand to the altcoin market, in August, and then sideways in September, and then it's gonna blow up again late September, October, and then November for sure. Everyone's pushing back and back and back, because the markets are being so manipulated. We can see the big companies, the big corporations are, they're buying Bitcoin one day and they're selling Bitcoin the next, and they're buying gold next day, and then they're buying some silver, and then you know what I mean? Like it's like
yeah,
who the fuck knows what they're doing, man?
yeah, yeah,
They're not stop. What they do is they don't stop. They treat money like something to put in the washing machine, and take out and dry out. So it's always moving with them,
yeah,
and we're just like trying to find for ourselves where the value is because they're changing the value as they move it. They're changing the value through the usage of the medium. And that's the Ponzi scheme. And that's what um, Max was talking about. So,
this would probably be a really good point and time to bring up Max, because I think, from my understanding of the Max story and what he says, is very profound to what you're talking about with what we're seeing with the charts and the manipulation of the markets. Because the Max story, although I'm aware of it, and I've actually heard from different sources people echoing the same sentiment or the same energetic type thing and theories about the manipulation of particularly crypto as we move forward. Now, would you like to stop sharing the screen and tell the audience about the story of Max?
yeah, too bad I don't have the image. I don't, do we want to see an image of what happened?
No, I
Is
don't
that,
think so.
yeah, better not. Okay, so last year in 2024, I'll just keep the first name. You guys can find it easy if you want to look for it. An investigative researcher by the name of Max, young guy, he was born in 87 cat, and he had a Substack and he was writing, and he had done all kinds of work in politics. There was actually a picture of him with one of the presidents. So we don't even really know his background clearly. So who knows? He could have been on both sides of it. He pretty could have really got a clear picture being on both sides of this mess. And what he essentially said was, well, we already know about what Gary's explained so many times on this channel, on his channel, about how these derivative systems work, how they're bubbles on top of bubbles on top of bubbles. And basically, he said that crypto is the same thing. But he said it's even worse because it's a bubble on top of a derivative system. So it's a bubble and a bubble. You know what I mean? It just doesn't end. It's a nested kind of setup, and there's something that's going on with they're building up Bitcoin so big, like a balloon, and at some point it's got to blow. Now, a lot of crypto traders and you know people that are aware of it, and even knowing the Bitcoin chart, we know it's like steady growth. I mean, you look at the history, it's like Bitcoin's going to go up forever, and the chart's incredibly powerful. But powerful in what sense? If it's coming from a derivative system, you know what I mean? So if the derivative system somehow survives, I don't see how Bitcoin won't keep its power. Of course it will. Now, if for some reason these derivative systems, as Gary's kind of been arguing, are not able to survive because of their fib of no chi sequential non-life process, if for some reason authentic metals of the sun and the moon, silver and gold, are able to really be utilized for true value, and more of the countries start utilizing those facts, then we could see, a house of cards collapse with crypto. We could possibly see it. Or we could just see, like what happened with Vietnam, happening everywhere, that all of a sudden your crypto is trapped somewhere and you're not able to get it without conforming to a new biometric digital ID system. And I know there's outs from that. I'm sure the exchanges are going to do that, to set it up that way, so that, you know what I mean, you can't get your money out unless you conform to it. Now, if you're working with, what is it in the US? We have something in Brown. I forgot what it's called. But you could have your own brokers that can get your trades done for you, for example. So there's that, and that's probably going to be the way to do it, because if you don't want to be part of their total control AI panopticon digital ID, system, then you're going to have to find other ways around it to keep your value. If you feel crypto is where you have value, because really, it comes down to a choice. Like, Gary and I are not trying to tell anyone where true value lies. It's obvious true value lies with the silver of the moon and the gold of the sun. That's obvious. But the means of value, the means of exchange, have always been utilized by some kind of medium, some kind of intermediary. And so we've used this derivative system, which Gary's argued is Gary has argued is just no way to be sustained, because it's Fibonacci, it's circular. There's no source, there's no center, there's no root to the earth. And if anything, the biggest message of our times that we both try and give to people is that we have to come back to nature, because we're so far removed from nature that there's no life. There'll be no life in us by the time all this is over, because all this energy that we're expending on these digital devices is also, we're putting energy into reaching you, but it's also pulling our energy out of our own bodies, and it's very dangerous. So we have to retain our humanity through retaining our connection to nature, or rather returning to nature to get that connection, because something was fucked with human beings, where all of a sudden we just lost our respect for nature, our connection, our genetic connection to nature. And that needs to be resolved and reevaluated and, reconsidered.
Yeah, brilliantly put, brilliantly said. And unfortunately, Max ended up um, in a very bad way, trying to raise consciousness, the awareness of the message he was trying to get across. And in a way, the fact that we're actually mentioning Max and talking about this in the way we are and connecting this with him, it means he didn't pass in vain, because what he was saying fundamentally is correct. Now, to take it, a couple of things a bit further, America's debt is unsustainable. We know that certain crypto or Tether for certain holds huge amounts of American debt and they hold huge amounts of Bitcoin. They also have a vault with something like 6 billion of gold in it. You know what I mean? So, really, a crypto system that has gold in a vault in Zurich. That's an interesting concept because crypto's not meant to need solid assets. So that's an oxymoron straight away. But when we look at it, if you was to say have crypto, and I'm calling Tether here in crypto. I know it's not. I'm just giving it a generalization here. Okay, the debt of America gets purchased by crypto that goes to the moon, that's then used to pay off the debt, and then is collapsed the next day.
Let me add to that real quick, Gary, if you wanted to pause for emphasis there. One thing that Max said, which was quite clear and quite obvious because it already happens with our, our debt-based banking system, is he said the same thing with the crypto exchanges that the money's already gone. It's not there to pull out. And that's what he was getting at is that if they indeed want if they're okay, so there's two possible directions here, to be honest. And one is what Gary just said. If they're able to utilize the cryptocurrency to funnel out debt, however they do it, that stuff just goes over my head at some point. Then what does that mean? Does that mean we're not going to have a crash? Does that mean we're going to go this way instead of this way? It could be. It depends what they do with the system in that regard. Because either way, and I mean, in the other direction, it would be the biggest catastrophic, you know, collapse of history. Build Bitcoin to the sky and then blow that shit up.
Yeah,
We'll be seeing the debris for decades,
yeah.
you know?
And
So,
sorry to
no,
interrupt,
go ahead, go ahead.
but the point of that would be that the majority of the money in crypto is actually from the general public, and it would steal a generation's worth of wealth off the public and allow the deep state players, the bankers, the BIS, to steal the generation's worth of wealth, which would further enslave humanity. You want to look on the dark side, that's what it is.
And that's what Max was talking about. And that's why he did his extreme act of protest to bring attention to this, that this is what they're planning and this is how it can occur. And so it's pretty dark. I don't know what else to add to that except he did recommend a book called Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palmer. I wrote that down. Check it out. But he recommended a book that kind of showed the structure of how these systems just do what they do in order
Yeah.
to continue to rob the public.
So what we've just said sounds a little bit dark, and it is potentially, but we're not going to take you down a dark route without giving you a potential solution. Remember, this isn't financial advice. But we're not gonna take you down an alleyway and say, there you go, there's the doors, you're done. When I certainly have looked at the system, the signs are there for me to understand there's an alternative without third party counterparty influence. Okay. And what we're seeing is this playing out in front of us. Now, I'm going to use a couple of examples One of them's quite interesting. First one, and I've spoken about this before, is China. China has got more gold than we can even imagine. And they are setting up a digital yuan and they're setting up bullion banks. There's one in Hong Kong and there's going to be one in Saudi Arabia. And when purchases are made country to country currently, and this could be part of the BRICS system or the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, those countries that have used yuan in the purchases of goods, materials, and services can go to those bullion banks with their digital yuan and trade that for gold on a one-to-one basis. This is something that the West can't do and hasn't done. The yuan, China, is now gold backed in all but name officially within the system, which means the BRICS nations that are connected to this have the luxury of being part of a gold backed currency. The custodians of the currency are China now. America says they've got X amount of gold. We're promised an audit that's never happened, and it probably won't ever happen. And if there is an audit, I wouldn't trust it because it's quite clear to me that if you've actually got something, you'd show it. And if you haven't got it, you would hide the fact that haven't got it. And China don't need to prove that they've got anything because they've actually opened the bullion banks and they've guaranteed the yuan one to one with gold. Now it's just what level the gold is going to go to at some point in time to how much your yuan and the gold ratio is. Because certainly there's going to have to be a revaluation at some point of gold in America that will help wipe out some of the debt. So when we're talking about the crypto wiping out some of the debt, or all the debt, actually it's not needed. Only a certain percentage of that debt would need to be wiped out if they revalued gold at say $24,000 an ounce or $50,000 an ounce. They would then clear their debts with the crashing of the crypto. They would steal a generation's worth of people's money because most Americans don't hold gold. Most Europeans don't hold gold. And so the enslavement and the control mechanism that's built up from this current fiat system of gold or lack of gold and silver, it should be backed and it's not, would be able to carry on with the implementation of digital IDs. On top of that, I don't think it's going to happen, by the way. I don't think it can go through. I think the pushback's going to be too great. But they would try to do this to enslave humanity. Do you really trust your government? Do you really think they've got your best interests at heart? I don't. And certainly the banking sector doesn't. Now, that's my view on what's going on, you know, because the dollar is not backed by anything apart from hopium and fresh air. And it's true, though, isn't it? And everything's backed on the dollar, which is the currency, the central currency of the world. And all America's done is weaponize that and use it as a big stick to beat everybody up, to overthrow governments and create merry hell within the Middle East and everywhere else. And however much I want to say, you might think, oh my God, but the biggest terrorist organization in the world currently has stars and stripes on its back, and it's a three-letter agency. And You look at world history and show me any color revolution that we've seen. And we spoke previously about Egypt when we were talking about IMF bailouts. Egypt went through a color revolution. Who do you think was behind that? Who do you think gave the nudge to then put Egypt into was it the second highest debt ratio?
Hmm. Yeah, they were the third, but then they got pushed into the second.
Yeah, for the IMF to take over that country. The bankers have taken over the country. Ukraine's the number one, and in third place is Argentina, and Argentina's just gone pop. It basically went broke on the 23rd, on the date that we predicted would be a big financial or the potential for a big financial issue, and we saw it. These people are playing games, and it's based on the Fibonacci sequence, on based on fresh air, and it's a creational bubble of make believe on top of a make believe bubble. And as Meten quite rightly said, when are we going to go back to nature and earth ourselves, ground ourselves? And the only two materials, I mean, obviously there's platinum, palladium, copper, but money wise, for the last 3,000 years plus, has always been gold and silver. And gold has been the country asset backing, and silver has been the monetary use between people. And they persuaded people to go onto the fiat currency, which was Fibonacci, and this is why we're in such a mess now. That's why the debt's completely out of control, and majority of G7 countries are on their knees about to collapse. You know, and we see it now. The other piece of information that I'm going to drop on you is Morgan Stanley. Now, when we start talking about investment for the last X amount of years, and it's a long time, when you've gone to go to an investment situation, they've gone to a 60-40. So 60% stocks and shares and 40% bonds, government debt bonds fundamentally. All of a sudden, last few days, Morgan Stanley has advised a 20% gold holding, 20% government debt bonds, and 60% in the stock market. Now, what does that mean in real terms to everybody? It means everybody's going to want to start buying gold. And what does that do to the price of gold? It pushes it through the roof. And we saw that on the chart on the 21st of October. The sun and the moon, the gold and the silver next to each other, sitting outside the Grand Trine and all the rest of the rubbish that's going there. And as far as I'm concerned, they're going to the moon. The moon. I mean, they're going to the universe. They're going to the stars.
I know the
They're
cliche is
out
they
there,
say the moon.
yeah. But they're gonna rock it. They're gonna rock it. We have seen this last week silver in the UK. One coin has gone to over £52 a coin. 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, a silver coin was selling for 22 to £24. Now, silver has been manipulated and controlled hugely. The trouble is now with these big banks, these bullion banks, is they don't hold enough silver to cover the silver. And at some point, people are going to start cashing out, which then means they're going to create money out of fresh air to cover their debts. And it'll put even more strain on the banking system and debase and devalue the dollar or the pound or whatever else you're talking about, even more so, which will create more inflation, which will also push the price of the gold and silver up because the money is worth less. So it's catch 22, devil in the deep blue sea. One will go, the other will go. There's nothing they can do to stop this. And this was seen a couple of years ago. It didn't matter what the governments did fundamentally, this was always going to happen because of the system that they've run. The fractional reserve debt based system is what we're talking about. Now, when silver gets to a certain point, it then puts the big bullion banks in trouble because they don't hold the silver they're telling us they do. And I know that. I'm certain of that. Same with the gold, why there hasn't been an audit in Fort Knox, because Fort Knox was empty. After America went off the gold standard, probably went off it in 71, it's very strongly rumoured, and it was actually reported on television in 73, I believe, that the gold was moved out of Fort Knox, transferred over to Europe, so that the gold could be resold hundreds of times rather than just three times, as was law in America. And they sold the gold hundreds of times. A handful of it, and some of it was actually delivered, but it was delivered to the Asian countries and turned into jewelry. And so soon, the richest people in the realm are going to be Chinese ladies, Indian ladies, Thai ladies, Vietnamese ladies, because they believe in gold and they have gold jewelry. And it's good quality gold. It's 23 carat or 22.5 carat gold around their necks. And that's where America's gold from Fort Knox is currently. And that's why they ain't going to do any audits. That's why they can't do any audits. That's why ultimately America's very likely to collapse. Because America is the biggest importer of gold at the moment around the world. Because they're scrabbling to try and get enough gold back into the coffers to try and back up what's going to happen when the collapse happens, because they're going to have to try and produce some form of gold, some form of physical. So, how do you get out of all this? You buy physical gold and silver and you hold it in your hand. Because remember, we've spoken about the banks already, that they can put a digital ID system and you can't get to your banks. You have to ask permission to buy anything from your banks. HMRC in the United Kingdom can go into your bank and decide that you haven't paid enough tax on your crypto assets that they've decided you've got, and they'll wipe your bank account out. And there's nothing you can do about it. And when the electricity's off and you can't get to those cryptos to cash them in anyway, what are you going to do? And yet, if you're physically holding gold and silver in your hand, the government can't touch you, the banks can't touch you, and you've got the only real, tangible, natural asset in the world that all other currencies have always come from. And there you go. So, what do you think of that, Meten? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have anything to add. I think that was brilliantly put. That's the situation. I mean, it comes down to what we have in our hands. We can't trust any of these, these like, man, it's just what a situation to create a system where you have pieces of paper that acknowledge what you supposedly own of value. It goes back to, and a lot of humans still have this. It goes back to that natural kind of nature connection. Like if you have gold and silver on your person, you know it's of value and you're holding on to it. It's on you. That's what value is. But on so many levels, we've been taught, we've been manipulated, even philosophically and theoretically, to pretend to understand that the copy is better than the original. The receipt is better than the actual item, you know? It always takes me back to that scene that I just don't get over in that movie Brazil that we watched on my Discord, remember? Where you get your dessert and the dessert comes with a little poster, a little picture, and it's like this amazing bread pudding picture, but then the dessert doesn't look like that. It's just like a bunch of glop. It's hilarious. But it's like to the point, Like we're told something and we're given something else. We're told like that this is what you have, but you just have a paper for it. So how does that make any sense? That how is this paper the reality? It's the whole idea. The map is not the territory. So we're all given maps, you know, for our little hunt, our little what do you call it? Those hunts that people have.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Treasure hunts. Yeah,
Treasure
yeah,
hunt, treasure hunt. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So we're given the map, and we're told, oh, you own your treasure, but here's the map for it, and your treasure is somewhere in the territory, and we're like, okay, but I'd like to have the territory of where my value is, whatever it is. No, no, no. Here's the map. You have it now. The map is the territory. No, the map is not the territory. But that's how our minds have been spun out in these webs of belief and theoretical truths that somehow we can't grasp in our hands our wealth and value. You know, this is not gold or silver, but this is a chrysocolla that has value relative to its how many of them exist, how
yeah,
many of them there are left. If everyone is buying chrysocolla stones, this be of great value.
yeah,
So, and this is in my hand. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
so and I don't say this to deride anyone. Like, we're all confused and we're all like washed up in this manner of perceiving and thinking that the map is the territory. The map is not the territory. All we have is the territory. But somehow, at some point, we were convinced that the map is the territory and we have everything we need. And in a way, I mean, everything is as perfect as it is. In a sense, the world is in a certain state of perfection because even though there's these energies always trying to distract us and pull from us, it's just there for us to practice our own personal vigilance and discernment. We can't learn and grow without adversity. So there's no need to get mad of all these plots and plans and distractions. Just know it's there so that we can know our center, so that when we move off our center, we're like, oh, I'm getting a little distracted. Let me bring it back. Oh, I'm starting to believe the map is the territory. Let me bring it back. This is the territory, what I own, what I have. That's the territory. And that's the value. And I'm holding on to it.
Because
So,
I'm the bank and I'm now going to make 5 maps and make you believe there's only one map. I've actually made 5, but
but
there's only
one,
one
two,
stone
five,
in Meten's hand.
but
I've
one,
just
two,
drawn 5 maps. And then I'm going to draw another 5 maps. And then I'm going to draw another 5 maps. And I'm going to persuade all these 15 people that they're the owner of something on the map that doesn't even exist. And that's what money is these days.
when you go deeper into crypto, when you make enough and you have enough, then there's all kinds of people coming at you like, if you really want to make your money in crypto, if you really, you're making money, you got a lot, right? Take that next step and become your own bank. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you get to start making your maps and telling everyone, oh, there's just one territory and I got it for you? How are you not going to do the same thing and build a bunch of maps? I don't know, but you know what I mean? There's teachers out there that are in systems out there saying, become your own bank.
Yeah.
If you're going to become your own bank, who are you learning from? Who are you following? I don't know. I don't know enough about that stuff. So some of the
No.
guys that do, there's certain there's certain ways of learning and programs and ways to do all that. But I haven't learned any of that because there's no one to call and talk to. Because
But
how much is it to get consultations with cryptos? Like $1,000 for half an hour with somebody? $2,000? It's absurd.
but the real money and the real bank and the real one, tangible one, is the gold and silver. Because when you own gold and silver, the banks no longer control you. You control your own destiny because that's real money. And if they make gold go to 25 or $50,000 an ounce, and you've got X amount of ounces, and you want to cash in into the fiat currency, You can, because there'll always be a market for something that's real and solid and tangible. Remember Weimar in Germany when they went into hyperinflation, a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. And yet, and yet, it's documented that a guy with one gold coin purchased a hotel. And when it all calmed down, that guy with the one gold coin who now owned a hotel then had a ready set business and a home to live in for one gold coin, while everybody else was running around with wheelbarrows of money trying to buy a loaf of bread. And you could buy a house in Germany for 35 silver coins, and you could buy a townhouse, a 4-story, 5-bedroom townhouse for 75 silver coins. I wonder how many wheelbarrows it would have taken to buy that house. 500, 600, 1,000 wheelbarrows? Would anybody have actually sold a house for the money? No, they wouldn't. But they would for something that was tangible and real because they knew it was real money and real value. Just an example. Just an example.
Should we go on to do the December charts or where are we at?
Yeah, shall we just have a quick look at them? Shall we just before we go, just to show, or would you like to do
Yeah.
that on the next month? Because next month we're going to be looking at, obviously, I assume we're going to be looking at November, and perhaps
Save that for next month. And that way we can do those along with the November full moon or new moon, whatever
yeah,
looks more revealing
yeah,
or
because I think
revelatory.
we'll get a bit more clarity of what's happened in October. Because I think October's going to be so crazy anyway, and there's, I mean, we're already starting to see with those companies going in America, Argentina, and everything else. We're already starting to see the cracks appearing, you know, and it's just which crack, how big is the crack going to be
Which
before,
crack is going to open up into an abyss? Who's going to fall into it?
yeah, who's going to fall into
Uh,
it, and how deep is the hole, and how many people, and what's the fall going to look like? Because regardless of,
all
of
right.
of the dumb elites' control mechanism of and their manipulation of the fractional reserve system, which is the Fibonacci sequence, at the point in which the public wakes up and realize they've been played like chumps, the bankers then no longer have control and they're in for the ride as well. But the difference between them and us is that they've got vaults full of gold. And when the ride finishes, they've still got vaults full of gold. And all you've got is a wheelbarrow full of money. Unless you're smart and potentially want to purchase something that's real and tangible. Again, not financial advice in any way, shape, or form.
We should do in the next video. We should each have a silver or gold coin. Just kidding.
Well, I hope you've got some.
We shall not reveal here. We shall not reveal.
But yeah, um, hopefully that's made sense. Part one and part two. We really are on the cusp of big change, I feel, and the charts are showing it. And I think October is going to be one hell of a crazy month in lots of respects.
As if September wasn't insane enough.
No, I know. So yeah, with that, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Love, light, and
Thank you so
blessings,
much,
and
everyone, for watching.
we'll catch up with you next month. For our financial. And you never know, there might be a bonus show of me and Meten talking about other things in the meantime. You never know your luck.
That's awesome.
So, love, light, and blessings,
Everybody take care.
everybody. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.